So in terms of teaching strategies, as we talked about this morning, one of the things that we need to think about is the repertoire of skills that an individual may or may not have. And if necessary, we need to teach new skills. If a person doesn't have a specific behavior in their repertoire that's needed, then we need to teach that. So we're going to pick our teaching strategies really based on what the activity is or what the context is where the problem is occurring. It's also going to be based on that individual's skill deficits or challenges, what it is that they're not yet able to do that they need to learn how to do. And we're also going to identify teaching strategies based on sort of general goals for that person, as well as, family goals if we're talking about a home setting. So commonly, there are lots of things that we might end up teaching, and some of the skills that we commonly would teach include a variety of communication skills. So again, thinking about problematic behavior often as a person's best way to communicate what it is that they need or want or don't want. If they don't have any other communication skills, that's what they might do. So we might need to think about teaching some other communication skills. We might also need to teach individuals some self-management skills. We all engage in and use a variety of self-management skills to get us through the day. And then we also might need to teach some skills that are related to a specific activity. So for example, I'm working with a family right now where there was some problem behavior in the morning getting ready for school routine. And part of the problem was that this child, in addition to having autism, has some motor skill development challenges. And so getting dressed is really challenging for him. And so we've looked at some of the adaptations that we can make to clothing, but we're also working on teaching him sort of step by step how to put on various items of clothing. And so we're teaching some activity-related skills within that routine as well. One of the things that commonly comes up as part of a PBS plan is teaching very specific communication skills using something that's called functional communication training. What this really involves, it sounds very fancy, but it's really just teaching an individual a better way to communicate whatever it is their behavior is essentially saying to us. So we identify in our assessment the function of the behavior and what the purpose is. I sort of describe this as if the behavior could talk, what would the behavior be saying? And then we're going to teach the person a better way to say what they need to say. So for example, if the function is tangible, to get something, an item or an activity, we would look at teaching the person a better way to convey that they want something. If the problem behavior essentially communicates, I want you to come and pay some attention to me, I want you to come and interact with me, then we're going to think of a better way that the individual might say that and teach them to engage in that particular communication skill. And if the problem behavior is escape motivated, we're going to teach them a way to either say, I don't want, or could I have a break, right? Something that would essentially get them what their problem behavior gets them. So when we're thinking about tangible kinds of messages, messages that communicate the I want something, there are different ways that we might teach individuals to communicate that message. We might use the picture exchange communication system, which in its short form is called PECS, and it's really important that you understand that PECS doesn't refer to a particular symbol, right, that's on a card. Those aren't actually PECS. People sort of incorrectly call them PECS all the time, but PECS is a manualized program to teach individuals to engage in an exchange behavior where they exchange a symbol or exchange a photograph. Or if they are blind, for example, they might actually exchange a tangible object, but they exchange as a way of communicating. So if I give a picture of a cookie, it means I want the cookie. And eventually we teach individuals to make sentences and so on and so forth. So that's what PECS is. So if you've been calling the symbols PECS, those are not actually PECS. Those are symbols. And PECS refers to this system that we have of teaching a particular kind of behavior. Some individuals might use a speech generating device. They might ask for what they want by using a communication app on an iPad, for example. Or they might use manual signing, right? So if that's appropriate for the individual, they might use manual signing to ask for a cookie, if that's what they want, okay? If the problem behavior serves an attention function and the child's engaging in problematic behavior to try and get somebody else's attention, then we would look at ways to teach them a different way to do that. We might teach them a specific message like saying, look, or come here, right? So what's a more appropriate way of getting somebody to either attend to what you're attending to, see what you're doing, come and do something with you? Depending on the individual, we might also be teaching conversational skills. So sometimes individuals are engaging in problematic behavior to kind of get involved in an argument almost, right? And it's about that exchange that they find reinforcing. And they want to have a conversation with people, but maybe other people aren't joining them in conversation. So one of the things that we can work on doing is perhaps teaching some conversation skills or teaching ways to begin conversations with others, right? So that they're actually engaging in that conversation in a more appropriate way where it's sort of a positive conversation versus, say, an argument or getting into trouble. In terms of escape-motivated behavior, again, we can teach individuals to communicate a variety of different messages. They might say no, or I don't want something, or no thank you, if that's appropriate, right? Sometimes no is a completely acceptable answer. Maybe going to bed isn't a choice, right? You're going to have to go to bed, and saying no to bed might not be acceptable, but then maybe wait is acceptable, right? Can we wait? And then the parent says, sure, you've got 5 minutes and then it's bedtime. So that they ask for that appropriate delay. Or they could ask for a break. Break is another way to get a short-term reprieve from an activity, right? So it's really about thinking, in this situation, if the behavior is essentially saying, I don't want to do this, what's a more appropriate thing that we could teach the person to say that essentially gets a similar outcome, okay? It really is important that we teach skills, right? I talk about this when I talk to my students at CapU about kind of like playing behavior whack-a-mole. And so if you approach problematic behavior as something to just get rid of and make it go away, and you try to sort of squash it down, like if you go to the fair and play whack-a-mole, all that will happen is another behavior will pop up. And then you whack that one down, another one will come up. So if you don't teach other behaviors and you simply try to squash away the problematic stuff, you're just going to get more problematic behavior. So it really is important that we teach skills. We teach replacement behaviors, what's a better way to get what you want. And then we also need to teach skills that are related to whatever activity the person is doing, right? So is it about dressing skills? Is it how to eat with utensils? Is it teaching somebody to follow a parent in a grocery store, right? I've done that lesson. I've worked with families where, I taught the child how to go through the grocery store with the parent and assist the parent in the grocery shopping versus running around the grocery store with the parent chasing them. It might be teaching an individual how to play with toys so that they can play with toys when the parent is otherwise occupied, like maybe talking on the phone. Could be teaching somebody to brush their teeth, but it's really important that we teach these skills. In terms of our priorities around teaching, certainly we're going to be looking at whatever the problematic routine or activity is. We're going to need to teach things around that, but it's also important that we consider the parent's goals for the child. Okay, and that our decision around what to teach kind of comes from those things. All PBS plans should include teaching. So it's not really a PBS plan if we haven't identified skills that need to be taught. So we need to include what it is we want to teach in terms of new behaviors, and then also how we're going to go about teaching those things, okay? And that's part of what I do in my role as a behavior analyst. Not only do I sort of help identify new behaviors, but then I figure out what's the best way, given the child, what's the best way to teach this child how to do that particular skill, okay? So lots of things we could talk about in terms of teaching, and teaching is really specific and individualized to the situation and the individual. So hundreds of things that we might end up thinking about teaching, but just so that you have the general idea that we can't get rid of a problematic behavior unless we teach something else, and we can't make activities that from the child's perspective are aversive, we can't make those less aversive unless the child has skills to be able to engage in those. So again, I suspect from your own experience, if you've ever tried to do an activity that you don't know how to do, algebra, very aversive, right? If you're taught how to do it, maybe not your favorite, but at least less aversive, right?